everybody, and welcome to the Savvy Writes Books channel, where today I am joined by a couple of my friends as we discuss a very important topic about author privacy, including ethical questions regarding what personal information do authors owe to readers, if any, what situations can arise when readers don't know anything about... Stupid kids. Hold on, change it to... Wait, no, hold on, don't change it. I'll change mine.
We're on your channel. I'm gonna be weirder.
We can do whatever we want on my channel.
We can dance if we want to.
Anyway, so today we are going to be talking about the concept of author privacy. How much privacy are authors entitled to, and all of that good stuff. Before we continue with today's video, first, we have a quick word from our sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Vite Ramen, a high-protein brand of instant ramen noodles that I have been loving to eat for lunch. I have mentioned so many times on this channel at this point how I do not have time to cook. I just don't. Sometimes people ask me, Savvy, how do you balance writing, making videos, running a business, doing freelance work, going to the gym so much, etc.? Well, for one thing, I don't cook, which is why I absolutely love finding brands like Vite Ramen that allow me to make quick meals that also give me lots of protein. It won't surprise you to know that high protein foods are kind of my favorite in general, especially since I love going to the gym so much and walking around in my muscle mommy hoodie. You can't be a muscle mommy if you don't eat protein. You just can't. Vite Ramen packets contain up to 31 grams of protein per packet, which is just around the amount that I'm looking for in an individual meal. It comes in lots of fun flavors like garlic pork tonkatsu, roasted soy sauce chicken, and vegan white miso. Yes, it even has meat-free options like the vegan white miso, which can be great for my vegetarian and vegan friends out there who are trying to get more protein into their diets as well. Vite Kitchens also offers Naked Nudes, which I think is the funniest name for a product ever, which are high-protein noodles without seasoning, so you can add your own flavors and create your own ramen masterpiece if you so choose. Because one of the main things that I talk about a lot on this channel is the importance of trying to be an ethical business owner, one of the things I really like as well about Vite Ramen is everything is made in the USA, that it is a company that is striving to have ethical business practices, that cares a lot about paying everyone a living wage, providing everyone with benefits. So it always is really nice to be able to shout out a business on my channel that really seems to be doing it right. If you're interested in trying Vite Ramen for yourself, click the link in my description below where you can get yourself a bundle of ramen that includes free shipping throughout the contiguous United States. Click on that link or type in viteramen.com/savvy where you can use my code SAVVY at checkout to get 10% off your order. I really hope you enjoy Vite Ramen as much as I have been, and I hope it helps you save some time cooking and get more daily protein just like it has for me. So that's viteramen.com/savvy or click that link in my description below, and don't forget to use the code SAVVY at checkout for 10% off. Now, let's get back to our video. So let's get the conversation kicking off with everyone's thoughts on this. My first thought is to just say authors don't owe anything about their personal life to a reader ever, under any circumstances. However, I understand that that can lead into some ethical gray areas regarding marketing and regarding what a book claims to be. For example, a situation I thought of is, let's say there's a straight white man who says that he's a black lesbian and writes black lesbian romance and markets it as Own Voices. And then if you find out that he's really not what he said he was, obviously readers are going to get upset because they were expecting an Own Voices book because that's what he said it was. But that's just an issue of lying. When is that okay? When is it okay to lie about your identity as an author? This is a complex question, y'all. So I want to hear from you guys. Guys, today we have Meg from iWriterly. If you haven't met Meg before, her channel iWriterly is wonderful. And on her channel, we are going to have another part of this collab where we are going to be talking about the topic of, do authors owe books to their readers, especially in situations like finishing a series. So that will be linked below. Make sure to check that out. Meg, what are your thoughts on author privacy?
I, in general, will say I don't believe that authors owe anything to their readers as far as information, personal information about themselves. I think it's very subjective. It's up to each individual person as to what they're comfortable sharing, and that's going to be different, obviously, per person and very subjective. But I do think that there, as you described, Savvy, there needs to be an element of honesty. If you're dishonest, then that's never okay, especially if it's with the goal of manipulating your readers, but I do think there are a couple of tough topics where people try to keep, I'm not keeping this succinct, but this will be my last comment and then I'll shift the microphone, I'm sure, over to RK. But I think a lot of folks try to out other people and say, hey, do you, like, are you queer? Like, are you gay? Are you bisexual? Are you trans? And therefore, as a means to say, yes, they're allowed to write this story. And there's a lot of gray areas and things that could be discussed here. But I don't think it's fair to force authors to out themselves as a reason for why they are writing a story.
I agree with you on that. Yeah, RK, what you got?
You're not an awkward third wheel. You're a part of the crew, dude. I also have to agree with that, but before I do, I also wanted to show this because of your example. This is a movie called LaQuisha, and it's literally about a white DJ who fails, so he pretends to be.
Oh my god! I've heard of this movie. I think I've watched YouTubers review it. I think that's where I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's probably one of the worst movies of all time.
It's like extremely racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in terms of what Miss Meg was talking about, I completely agree. I mean, we talked about this for the recording for Meg's channel on kind of what authors owe their audience, and feel like it's pretty much just books. I think privacy is amazing. I pretty much have deleted or privated all of my social media accounts because privacy is wonderful, and these mobs that try and force information out of you and bully information out of you have led to some really harmful releases of information that's forced authors to either go through new trauma or relive past trauma, with the ones who were like, how dare you write about this essay in your book when you haven't gone through it. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, now they have to talk about the worst experience of their life because you were so offended that they wrote about something that they might not have gone through. Congratulations, assholes.
Well, this was such a thing with, like, so I've always said that I love the Own Voices movement as a concept. I love the idea that you can have books out there that are written by someone who openly talks about having experienced the thing that they're writing about or belonging to a demographic that they're writing about, because they can talk about it from this very personal perspective, and that can come through in the story. One example that I loved knowing was an Own Voices book was John Green's book Turtles All the Way Down, because of its OCD representation. And as someone who has OCD, I read the book and I thought that it was extremely accurate, like one of the most accurate things I'd ever read, and I loved that about it. However, that said, I love that you can have that, but I don't think you should have to have it as a requirement. There's a difference between liking something and seeking it out and actively wanting it, and getting mad when you don't have it. I don't think people remember that there is a middle ground there, that you can say, I like Own Voices books. I want to intentionally try to support books by authors who are open about these things about themselves. You can do that, but still not, like, if there's a book that isn't necessarily marketed as Own Voices, you don't have to start harassing and trashing that author about it. You can also just do nothing. Like, that's always an option. And I think people forget that. So that's always been a big thing for me, especially when you get, like, I did a video about this on my channel a while back that a lot of people probably remember, which was about our friend Becky, the author of Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda. We love her. She's wonderful. But this exact situation happened to her, right? Where she wrote an LGBTQ book that got very popular, and a lot of people started asking her if she herself was LGBTQ because they needed to know in order to know if it was okay to like the book or not. And she just got harassed about it so much to the point where she eventually did come out, but she didn't want to. Like, and that's her right to not have to. And I think that was a story that got a lot of people talking about this situation. But there are people that have still, even after this situation, and there was a situation with a few other authors too. I don't remember the author's name, but I know you mentioned, like, reliving trauma. There was one with, like, an author who had written about SA in their book, and people were like, oh, this is disgusting that you would write about this. And then they eventually felt pressured to come out about the fact that they had experienced that in their life, which is completely just, like, horrifying that that would even happen in the first place, that people would demand that information of someone. So there are people who have seen these situations happen time and time again, but still double down on it because they'll say these things like, I can't believe this author wrote outside their lane. I can't believe they wrote outside of their experience, things like that. So I personally think that we should not have a culture of demanding information from authors about their personal lives, but at the same time, I can see, like, how there could be a situation where someone might totally lie about themselves or totally inaccurately market something. But I've always been a fan of, I want to judge the work primarily on the quality of the work. I've read plenty of books where they're written by straight men but they'll have like a lesbian character, bisexual female character or something, and I'll still think that they did a great job from my perspective as a woman, and I don't have any problem with it. So it's definitely kind of a sticky situation, but I would always err on the side of never demand information from authors that they're not freely giving to you. That's where I would always land.
What's really frustrating now, though, is because of the rise of social media, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just a little frustrating to see, is authors are inherently linked to their product now, too. It almost feels like you're not just buying the book, you're buying a piece of the author, and you want to get to know them, and you want to own a piece of them, and it does sort of create almost that, potentially, or at least create, I don't want to speak in absolutes, potentially create that sense of entitlement of more knowledge because of the growing parasocial relationships. It's no longer just about, they published a book I like, I'm going to go to the bookstore and ask if the new book has come out. It's following their career on social media, seeing if they're uploading new things on YouTube, getting to know all of the dirty details of their life, because I'm not just invested in their work, I'm invested in the reality TV show of their life.
Or you get weirdos like me who are on the internet first, published a book second. So you have the parasocial relationship first, and then you have the book. So yeah, I think it's sticky. What do you guys feel about the whole buying the author as a product? I feel like it's nice to have that personal connection, but sometimes it can be really too much. But also there's the ethical thing, like with the author of like Harry Potter. I don't want to buy her stuff anymore because of what she has been saying and doing and advocating for. So it's this weird, how do you separate the author from the product at this point?
Yeah, that's the whole situation now of like, do we separate art from the artist, which is, I think, been a ongoing discussion for as long as I can possibly remember. I don't think there has ever been a universal consensus on whether people should separate the art from the artist when it comes to purchasing a product or things like that. And I'm not going to claim to have the answer definitively to that. I don't think that I'm smart enough to answer this question people have been wondering for so long. But yeah, I do think that that's a good point to bring up, is like, how much is a product separate from the person who creates the product? Well, then you get into all of these discussions about means of production. You get into all these discussions about how any item is produced, and it becomes a whole debate on capitalism, becomes a whole commentary on capitalism. I don't know, dude.
I mean, I think we all agree that authors deserve privacy. I don't think that's even like a debate. I think we just all agree everyone has a right to privacy. The issue I see is an author also has to make money. And it's tough to make money without establishing a relationship with readers. And one of the first pieces of advice that anyone that goes online that wants to create sort of a brand online is authenticity, welcoming people into your life. And it's almost brushed off as like it's such a simple thing to do, when in reality it's like it's not. Like you're welcoming strangers into your home.
Yeah, I guess that leads to the question of like, if you want to create a product, whether that is a book or, you know, a movie or music or something creative, if you want to create some type of artistic product, do you have to also be an influencer? I guess that's the question. Does social media make it so that you have to be an influencer in order to be successful in a creative field? I think it really does depend on what type of book you're writing, on what type of product you're creating. I'd say, like, for example, in young adult literature, people really want personal information about the author. Maybe it's because the readers are primarily teenagers, and teenagers are very emotional, and because of that they feel like they need to connect with another person like that. But then when you go into adult genre fiction, a lot of people are writing like things like romance, erotica, you know, hard sci-fi, you know, mystery, things like that. You go into these rapid release adult genre fiction type of things, and a lot of people there don't really care much about the author. They just care about getting as many books as possible as they can, because they just want more and more of that type of story. I really do think it depends on who your target audience is and what that group of people traditionally is known to expect from people. I think it makes a huge difference.
I think that's a great point. I'm going to add in also the method of publishing. If a lot of authors, and I've spoken about this on iWriterly, but a lot of authors in the traditionally published space, if you are trying to get published now, the publisher really smiles upon if you come in with a platform. You do not always have to, and you can absolutely be published if you don't have an author platforms, but it's kind of smiled upon if you do come with it, which is like, hey, I have a built-in audience. My book, therefore, hopefully is more appealing to the publisher. So in some ways, I feel like introverts are dicked over because, it's a lot of the extroverts who are willing to put themselves online to talk about things. Not always, I'm overgeneralizing here, but it is sort of encouraged to have an author platform for traditional publishing specifically. And for self-publishing, you kind of have to in some capacity to be able to promote your books. Not always, and there's ways to go around it. Like Savvy, you don't have to make videos under your romance pen name, but I'm sure you have to market yourself some way and share some information.
I haven't really so far.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty fucking cool. She's just publishing.
Okay.
The algorithm's really working for her right now.
It's experimental in the algorithm. I'm journaling every day about like what I'm learning each day on the process. I'm eventually going to publish that journal. But right now I'm just going through the process and learning things every day. I'm experimenting a little bit with Amazon ads, but I haven't done many of them. For the most part, I'm just seeing, oh, this book made 3 cents today and this book made 0 cents today. What did the book that had 3 cents do? Let me try writing another one like that one with a few elements different. Oh, now it made 20 cents today. Okay, let's see. And just doing stuff like that is really just experimenting with the algorithm, kind of like I did when starting a YouTube channel. Kind of like that. Yeah. When I started my YouTube channel, I started by trying to promote my videos on social media pages and joining YouTuber Facebook groups and doing all those kind of things. And it helped a little bit, but then, when I make a YouTube video about reviewing a book that came out yesterday that everyone's really talking about, people are going to find that regardless, and you don't have to do any promotion for that. So it really is kind of, it's all trial and error at the end of the day, dude. That's what kind of sucks about it, but it's also kind of fun.
It's very cool. You should talk to Savvy more about it because I get the screenshots of her sales every single day, and I'm just eating with popcorn, taking a look, like following her journey in real time. It's really fucking cool to just see how you can navigate the Amazon algorithm when you're publishing so quickly. I mean, the one difference, what I can say is, and I guess this is a piece of advice I've learned from Savvy, if you want to learn how to publish, focus on short fiction and publish a lot, because then you can really learn how Amazon works.
Yeah, I've put out 15 short romances since Christmas.
What does short romance mean?
Like 50 pages.
Okay.
Yeah, like 10,000 words per story, roughly.
So then you would potentially be an example of how you can get away with sharing very little to nothing about yourself as an author and still doing the author thing, which is writing stories. That's really cool. Good for you.
Which is wild that it's me that's doing that because my whole life is public on YouTube under my main name that I'm using to write things under. Like I'm doing the whole like building a platform and being an influencer and letting people into my life and all of that. And then I'm also not doing it at the same time because I have 2 personas. And I think that's extremely fun. But I think that leads into the discussion that I wanted to get into next regarding this topic, which is how this works when we have pen names, how this works when we write under names that are not our own. Because here's an example that, you guys kind of brought up, which is about J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter books and stuff like that, and how, she writes under male pen names sometimes. And I know that now everyone knows it's her, so it's not as much of a secret, but kind of like back when her career was getting started, she would write under a name that sounds like a man because she felt that, maybe being male might help the book sell better. And that's like a common thing we see, like where people analyze like job applications. There have been studies done that people will trust someone with a masculine name more just due to like internalized bias and things like that. So sometimes you get these people who do pen names for that. Is that considered lying to your reader to do that? And then on the flip side, I would ask, what if it's the other way around? What if you have a man who's writing under a woman's pen name, writing a book? We see all those Twitter accounts that are like men writing women, and it shows like how men are objectifying women in their writing and writing just like her boobs were bouncing up and down boobily as they boobled down the stairs. But my question is, I guess, like, what is necessarily ethical when we choose a pen name? Do we owe it to someone? Like, if I want to make my pen name Bob Smith and write books that are in genres that typically men outsell women in, most people wouldn't have a problem with that. But if a man wants to go into romance and write erotica that heavily objectifies women but makes his pen name like Elizabeth Jones,
she sounds hot.
Is that unethical? In that
Careful,
case, will
don't
readers
out me,
feel
Gabby.
lied to? What?
I said, careful, don't out me.
I'm curious what people's thoughts are on that.
I respect and understand the desire for privacy in general, and therefore the appeal for pen names. But I don't like the idea of someone using a pen name to manipulate others. But I also understand that there are internalized bias. As a woman, especially a woman who works in the corporate world, I experience sexism and misogyny all the time. And so I understand then what the appeal of wanting to disguise yourself more or less, or use a masculine pen name, so that way to avoid sexism and hopefully have more readers enjoy a story that presumably you worked hard on. But I hesitate with the dishonesty stuff. Like you gave the example of a man before Savvy who is writing a romance story, and it was, what'd you say, it was like misogynistic or something,
or like, and maybe even not misogynistic, but let's say there's a man writing a romance story, and I don't know, the descriptions of women are very objectified, or they're very sexualized, or things like that. A lot of times when I'm reading romance, or people will read romance written by women that does that and not really give it a second thought, but then when you read romance by a man that does that, a lot of times we're like, ooh, that's a little weird. So that's just based on what I've seen on Twitter. Like, I'm not here to be the authority on this, but just based on Twitter, people be like, oh, this men writing women thing is very weird, the way men write women. But I've also read romances where women will write women in some of the weirdest ways possible too, but often don't get backlash because people are like, oh, it's a woman writing another woman, and it's okay. It's just part of the story. It's part of the fetish. It's part of suspending the disbelief, whatever. I'm not here to say that there's like a definitive way that this all happens. I'm just curious, like, what people's thoughts are on the ethics of choosing a pen name that is, I mean, this is just even talking about gender. We haven't even gotten into, like, you could choose a pen name that is like from a different country than what you're from, to pretend to be from somewhere else. Or like, is that lying? Because at what point does a pen name become lying? I don't know.
It's interesting. I guess the line for me is gender is potentially okay depending on the reason, but if you pretend you're from another culture because maybe you're writing about a culture you're not from, I think that's unethical. I'm curious what you guys think.
I think it probably is too, but I'm also not the morality police, so I don't know for certain on anything, yeah.
I don't really have an issue with it as long as it stays in. I think my issue would be is if they started launching an author platform and maintain that identity. If they're only publishing books and that's their only existence online, and all they're doing is just having a name that, because like, it's not necessarily publishing. I know we have this Western default, but a lot of times it could just be someone who wants to sound American and publish to an American audience because that's where a large market is. And I really wouldn't have an issue with someone from a developing nation publishing under a more Western name to sell to an American audience because there's a larger audience here that has more discretionary income. I don't think my issue with pen names exists until it goes beyond the actual publishing of the book and beyond fiction. If they were to then start a Twitter account and start tweeting from that perspective of a person that they are not, that's where I'd have a very clear this is an issue. But
because at that point they're selling themselves as an influencer, they're not just selling the book anymore, so it's something completely different. And in the case I'm talking about, like, let's say, okay, you're a man and you're writing under a woman's name, or you're a person writing under a name that's from a country that you're not really from, something like that, and all you do is write the book. You don't have an author like persona under that. You don't have like content you're putting out pretending that's your name. You just write books under that name and publish them and have a different pen name for something else. Would it be unethical for readers to question that, to say, are you really from this place? Are you really this gender? Are you really whatever? Are you really this? Because at that point, are you forcing people to out themselves? Like, I know there have been cases where it's like people aren't necessarily going to be open with their entire ancestry. People aren't necessarily going to be open with, like, whether they might be questioning if they're trans or something. Like, there's so many situations I can think of that either you do have someone who is faking something to profit off of it, which is really shitty, but the flip side of that is you could also end up leading it into a situation where someone does have to out something about themselves.
I feel like it's so subjective. In every single instance, it's all different, what may or may not be ethical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I always think of like the punch up versus punch down thing too, right? If there's an author who's not from America who wants to publish here and then choose an American pseudonym, I'd be like, yeah, cool, that's fine. But then if there's like a Caucasian American who wants to pretend, say that they're Japanese, I don't think that that's good. I think that would be a little deceitful, but that's just my perspective, and it's really tough.
I agree. I do think it would be deceitful also. But then my question is, how do we know if they are or not? If the author isn't providing any personal information, how much is it ethical for readers to ask of them, to ask, is this pen name your real name? And then if they find out, like, okay, is this pen name, like your example of someone who's white writing under a Japanese name, what if it comes out that that person actually is Japanese, but has, like, cut off that side of their family or something and doesn't want to talk about it, or, like, that they, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many, like, potential situations that I could see it falling into, that I would always err on the side of just don't demand anything from an author. But at the same time, then you get situations like just what you're talking about, where you can get people who are going to take advantage of it, who are going to do things like a man writing under a woman's name to try to stand out as a woman in a genre or something. But, like, how often is that really going to happen? And, like, do we normalize things based on the bad actors who take advantage of a situation? I would say it's not right to do that, just because it can lead to situations with some of these forced outings of people that we've seen in the past. And I'm like, I would almost rather just, like, err on the side of let a few scammers get away with it rather than ruin a few innocent people's lives. But I also don't know if that's necessarily the ethical answer either, because I'm not any moral authority on anything, for sure.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of morality police, I think, within the book community specifically. And so you kind of, like, I don't know, incentivize them potentially to harass other people. You know, if there's, like, hard and fast lines. I don't know. There's just no right answer, and it's such a tough topic.
I don't know. It is a really complex topic, which is why it makes for an interesting discussion, but it also makes it kind of hard to navigate some of these things, especially when a lot of people in book reviewing spaces and just book fandoms and things can be very opinionated in good ways and in bad ways. And I don't know. I think these situations, these controversies are arising in the first place because these situations are tough to navigate. And I wouldn't want to see someone getting away with scamming their readers by pretending to be someone that they're not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is it worth it to let a few people get away with that to foster a culture where other people don't feel pressured to out themselves about other things? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, because it's complicated.
Yeah. And a lot of it goes back to, for what reason are you hiding the truth? Are you hiding the truth to protect yourself? Are you hiding the truth to manipulate others and gain something such as a monetary gain, because maybe you get more readers because you were dishonest about who you are? But we can't know their motivations without being in their brains or them telling us, in which case we also can't demand that information from people because of author privacy. And
I tend to always err on the side of judging the work itself and not based on who the author is or anything like that. But at the same time, I also do like supporting books that are own voices perspectives as well, because I feel like I can go into it knowing that someone wrote this from a place of experience, and I think that there's something very valuable in that as well. So I just think it's a very multifaceted topic where we have to look at it as there are things we can prioritize, but not things we can demand. And that can be a little bit difficult sometimes too. But that's kind of how I see it, I think.
I like that phrasing, that there are things that we can prioritize, but not things we can demand.
Because, I mean, if we think of situations with, like, people who have been forced out of the closet, that's happened multiple times at this point. It's really disgusting to see. Theoretically, could there be someone who's just, like, a straight man pretending to be gay to write a book and market it? Yeah, I mean, you could do that. People can lie. Buster on Arthur said it the best.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
But at the same time, I don't think we can alter the entire world to fit the people who lie. I don't know. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on any of that, because it really is a topic that is, I don't think it's easy to answer. So I guess if we want to move into a world that is ideal for both author and reader, that is going to leave authors feeling like their privacy isn't violated, but also leave readers feeling like they weren't cheated out of something, what do we think best practices are for authors when choosing pen names, or choosing what to reveal about themselves publicly, or choosing how to market their books? What are some things that we think we should prioritize?
How many pen name controversies have there been?
I don't know. Probably not that many, because people with pen names are generally pretty anonymous with them, so I don't think
that
most people
feels like
even
a
know
pretty-
about their personal lives. Yeah.
That feels like a pretty small one.
Yeah.
That one just feels like don't pick a potentially inflammatory pen name and we're good to go.
Yeah. You're probably right.
So boom. Checked one off the box of your question.
There you go. Like, I know that I, as a reader, when I'm reviewing a book, I try, if the book is about the author's personal life, and if it is nonfiction, like if it is a self-help book with memoir in there, then I might talk about the author's personal life because their personal life is the content of the book. But if it's a work of fiction, I'm pretty much never going to... And if I've made a mistake on this in the past, in a previous video, someone can probably dig up me going against this in the 4 years I've been on YouTube. But, like, for the most part, I don't think it's a good idea to focus the review on, like, this author shouldn't have written this because it is bad that they wrote outside of their lane. Like, of course, if there's descriptions in the book of a certain sexual orientation or gender or race or anything like that that come across as hurtful to you, absolutely talk about that in your review, but it's not necessarily to say that the author must not belong to that demographic because their description was so bad or something. They could just be a bad writer. Like, that's other, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of potential outcomes.
Okay, I know we're going off the topic of author privacy, but there's a lot of things that have been discussed in traditional publishing that essentially it's, if you have this experience, especially as it relates to own voices, then you can write this book. But if you're not from, for example, this culture, then maybe you shouldn't be writing this book.
Yeah.
Like, I knew of authors who were Caucasian. They lived in Japan. I think they were not from Japan, but they lived there for a bunch of years. And they wrote a story based in Japan, and their book was not accepted by traditional publishers. And so... because they were not Japanese. And so I struggle with this, like, to what extent can we write or not write a story based on our own experiences or what we identify as? Because if people don't write about these things, then maybe there wouldn't be diversity in books too. Like, it's this weird line of what stories is ours to write and how can we best represent diversity within our novels? Because I personally feel that diversity is very, very important. So
I completely agree. I think diversity in books is extremely important. And that's why, like, I don't want to see a world where, like, a white author is only writing white characters, because there are... I mean, the U.S. is majority white, so there are still going to be a lot of books by white authors that come out, just statistically. And to have there be no diversity in those characters whatsoever, I think would be a tragedy. I mean, I also think we should be promoting books by authors of color as well, and be promoting own voices works and things like that. But like I said, you can prioritize something without demanding it. I think you should absolutely prioritize that. But at the same time, I think that the more diversity more books can have, the better. That's how I see it. And I think that's a lot where, like, beta readers come in, people having diverse critique groups with people of various perspectives. And I'm not saying that's the answer, I'm just saying that's one way that people can work on that. I don't know. But I'm also, again, not an expert, so that's just kind of my first thought on it.
Okay, sorry, I was hesitating in case you wanted to add anything.
You're good. No, I don't really think I have much to add. It's one of the beauties of the rise of self-publishing. It's really introduced new cultures and helped grow the positive side of the own voices movement, because it did start as a very positive movement. I know it has some negative consequences with public outings of people who weren't ready to be outed, but it did have that positive start, and we have seen things like, for example, a rise in fantasy that's no longer medieval European, now looking at other cultures, historically, their mythologies, and introducing those to fantasy books, which is just brilliant and real. I also really, I mean, maybe my controversial take, which I know is hit or miss, and I don't like saying too many things on the internet unless it's a joke, because I don't like having any ammunition against me, but I kind of like seeing people find influence in cultures that aren't their own. I think it's a good thing. I'm not saying to appropriate the culture, but to show the respect for it and learn and educate yourself and find some influence in it doesn't seem wrong. My last book was based in New Orleans. I live in New Orleans. It's a lot of cultures down here to learn from and educate yourself on. It would be kind of silly for me to just write a book that takes place in New Orleans and focus on what it's like to be a born and raised New York Jew. Like that would feel kind of weird. Welcome to this New Orleans based book. Let me tell you about my experience being raised in New York. Like,
well, at the end of the day, yeah, I think that the way I would approach it as an author is to be honest with my readers, and when using a pen name, to not market myself as a person, but to market the books solely as books without marketing any author personality that would be fake, but rather just to have a name that goes with these books so that they are under a separate thing for searchability purposes. But then when marketing myself as an author, to be very honest and upfront about my life with my readers in ways that I'm comfortable with, and then as a reader to just not demand pretty much anything of authors about their personal life. I'm a very honest and open person, and I'm a person who's very extroverted and very, like, I have no issue being, like, upfront, but I know that there's a lot of people who see the world completely differently from that, and that's not fair to put that pressure on them to reveal things about their personal life when at the end of the day, they're there to sell you a book. Now, I think there's a clear exception to that, which is nonfiction. So if you're writing nonfiction and you are pretending to be a doctor and you're not really a doctor, then you're a scammer, dude. Things like that. Yeah, the reader is entitled to know if you really did get your medical degree or not, if you're going to write a book about health or something like that. I think that those cases where someone is selling you nonfiction information, I think nonfiction is just a completely different animal when it comes to that. But if you're writing fiction, I don't think that readers should be demanding anything about your personal life. But that's how I see it.
I should clarify that for me personally, especially on my writerly, I only talk about fiction. So all my comments here pertain to fiction.
Yeah, I had forgotten, which is weird because, like, I'm writing a nonfiction book right now, and I wrote a nonfiction book before, and most of my work has been in journalism, so I just realized I completely forgot to talk about nonfiction. But yeah, if you're writing nonfiction, like, yeah, you do need to be a little more expectant that people are going to want to know things. And when it comes to things about your personal life, like, that doesn't mean things necessarily about having to know your family history or your sexual orientation or trauma that you've gone through or things like that. But if you are writing something and marketing it as nonfiction, anything that's kind of relevant to the book's material, like we talked about, what's his name? James Fry? A Million Little Pieces? Yeah, the guy who completely made up his memoir. Like that dude, who lied about everything that happened in it and had it on Oprah's book club and all of that.
Shout out Oprah.
Shout out to Oprah. Well, we could talk about Oprah launching the careers of Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz, who are also fake doctors, but that's a different topic. My point is, when it comes to nonfiction, if someone's planning to read something and think that they're learning about a piece of history or information about how to live their life better or some type of strategy or something, if they think they're reading to learn factual information and the author turns out was a fraud in their field or something, I can see where in that case you may want to demand certain information from the author, and that would be reasonable in that case. But in fiction, I think we can almost set a hard line that I don't really think it's ever really appropriate to demand information about an author's personal life.
Do we want to talk at all about what we personally feel comfortable or is appropriate sharing online?
Sure, like comfortable as in like what I'm comfortable sharing about myself or what I think is appropriate for anyone to share.
What we personally do, so what we choose to share online.
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty open online about anything that solely affects me. So like I'll talk about the fact that I have OCD and how that's affected my life. I'll talk about being an LGBTQ person. I'll talk about being bisexual. I'll talk about all of that because that's just me. I don't talk about, and I won't bring up specific things because my whole point is that I don't talk about this, but I don't talk about certain traumas that I've had in my family. I don't talk about certain things that I've experienced that are things like that, just because they involve other people who aren't as open and public about their lives as I am, and I don't want to be revealing information publicly about other people who they didn't consent to be a public figure just because I did. So that's not really my place to do that, even if it is something that affects me. So like if someone were to say to me like, Savvy, how do you know that you can write about this trauma? Have you experienced this trauma? That's not really fair to ask me because in certain situations, certain traumas that you could experience inherently involve other people and they didn't consent to that being public. So there's situations like that where I'm not going to share anything that could violate someone else's privacy, but I will share something that affects only me, sure.
Okay, you want to go?
You're waiting for me?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know. I go online every weekday, Monday through Thursday, I guess, and not every weekday, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., give or take, and just tell jokes with Savvy. And then on Fridays, I go on at 3 p.m. to write with Savvy. So I'm sure I've revealed parts of myself online. I know I talk about my job somewhat regularly, but I'm also working, so it makes sense to talk about my job. And I talk about the Pelicans because I love sports, and I talk about MMA because that's a passion of mine, and I guess New Orleans. So I don't think I'm
like you're open about the fact that you live in New Orleans, like things like that. Yeah,
like I don't think I actively hide things about myself. I just don't really feel the need to talk to people about myself online because I'm online for a very specific reason. Like I'm online to talk to this chick right here.
I'm very honored that you've stayed on the internet just for me. That makes me feel very loved.
That's about. I mean, I do sometimes not like attention online. I deleted my Twitter. I privated my Instagram. I mean, that's pretty much. I don't like actively block people on there or tell them not to follow me. I just filter out because I like knowing who's following me, shit like that. I don't know. I'm definitely more private than Savvy. I know that for sure. That's about it.
Oh yeah, most people are though. Like I'm a person I'm weirdly comfortable with like everybody. Like that's just kind of how I am. So, but there are things that I don't talk about solely because I know that talking about them would affect someone else. You know, it would say something about someone else. If I talked about this thing that happened in my childhood, someone's going to be able to infer something about my mom or my grandma or something from that. And that's not, even if I want to be open about that for the sake of showing that I'm writing from an authentic place or something, it's really not my place to be. So that's,
I'll geek out about real estate. That's something I'm very open about. If it doesn't matter. Like if I'm spending money on a house, it doesn't matter if it's tens of thousands of dollars or not. Like I'll tell people exactly what it takes for me to buy properties, what my plans are with it, why I like doing it. So that's probably something that some people are private about that I'm not. I just can geek out about that all day, every day. I love talking that shit, and it's fun to talk about. I don't have any desire to make content on it, though. I just like having conversations with people.
I think there are some topics like real estate or, say, I don't know, salary that are usually, or rather traditionally, haven't been openly discussed, but I feel that they should be.
Oh, yeah. I think, well, because the whole concept behind, like, don't talk about money, people say that at your job, like, oh, don't ever share your salary with someone. That leads to this culture of, like, employees not sharing their salary and then the boss being able to screw over whoever wasn't willing to negotiate as high, you know what I mean?
I hope in the future people will be more open about their salaries, or that companies, I know like now, I know we're going way off topic. Companies are now being forced online to share the salary range of positions, whereas in the past they did not have to. And I think now there'll be like tiers in companies, and some companies are standardizing you can make from this much to this much in this position. Okay, the next tier up is this much to this much, which I do appreciate because there's statistics out there, and I should look it up. But what I have heard, and I don't have a source on this, is that men typically make about 20% more than women for the same position. On average, this can be more or less, but a lot of times employers will offer them more for whatever reason it is. So anyway, so I think this is very good discussion to talk about. But as for what I personally talk about online as it relates to iWriterly and my author platform, I have become very private. I think when I started my channel, it was pretty small, and then I grew very quickly. So I think I had a lot of growing pains as to what I was and wasn't comfortable sharing. But as time has gone on, I will not discuss family online. I won't follow my family or friends on my public social media profiles as like a way to protect them. I won't share my child's name or picture or video online. And I don't discuss my legal name, my age. I am open about my sexuality because I think representation for that is really important. And that's something that I chose that I was comfortable with. But I think there's a lot of things for me personally that I would not share online. And I know there's like family bloggers and vloggers and the whole thing that share lots and lots of stuff. stuff about their family and personal life and children online. Me personally, I just will not do that.
I think it's smart. I think people who share too much about their kids online, that's one of the things I hate the most on the internet. So I think you're doing it the smart way. So when it comes to things that people want to be public about, I think it's going to be a very personal decision, and different people are going to want to be public about different things. This is not a thing I'm usually public about, but I had a period in my 20s where I questioned if I was trans. And I'm not, but I had a period where I questioned it. And I wanted to write characters that were trans and non-binary in my stories, but I didn't want to get called out for that because I didn't want to ever be forced into talking about it. Especially now that it turns out I wasn't, right? Like, so that's a situation that, like, I don't mind talking about that in a video now, but at the time I didn't feel that that was anyone's business. And I'm an extremely open person. It's just that, like, if I'm ever uncertain about something, I don't want to publicly be uncertain about myself, you know? So, in conclusion, I think that in general, like I was saying earlier, prioritize but don't require. Authors' personal lives and personal information, what they're comfortable with sharing is going to be very different. And that can come down to, like, a lot of authors, they don't even want to share what they look like. And should they ever have to? No, I don't think so. I don't think they should. But that's a whole other topic as well. Overall, though, I think this is a complicated topic, and it's good that we're talking about it and opening up the discussion. I'm also interested in what other people think about this in the comments below, because I know this is definitely, like a lot of things in life, is going to be somewhat of a case-by-case basis, which can be a little unsatisfying of an answer, but that does tend to happen. Meg, where can people find you and your podcast?
Yes, if you guys want to follow me on iWriterly on YouTube, that is all for writing advice and how-tos for traditional and self-publishing. For the folks who like romance novels and reading them, especially these steamy ones, you can find myself and Courtney on the Spread Those Pages podcast. So that's on YouTube and all the podcasting platforms.
Thank you. Also, shout out to your co-host Courtney and her new venture as a solo author. Good luck to her.
Yay, go Courtney!
We love and support Courtney. She's awesome. Y'all, thanks for watching this video. We'll see you again soon. In the meantime, support authors and small business owners. We love to see it. Have a great day.
We're on a mission from God.
Let's go! Because the world is run by the man.
Boom. Roasted.